Hello, everybody. We had a little problem, a little delay, but I think everything is all right now. We are continuing the conference at the University of São Paulo. I am Professor Marcos César Alvarez. I'm from the Department of Sociology. I'm a sociologist too. I am the moderator of this activity. I would like to thank you, Fred, and the other in the organization of the conference and for the invitation to moderate this keynote. It's the keynote for the concept of socio-political metrics and the relations between sociology and history in Latin America. Our guest today is the Professor Manuel Antonio Garretón from University of Chile. I will make a short introduction because we have a problem with the time. The Professor Garretón is a sociologist and a political scientist with a doctorate from the École des Hautes Études en Sciences Sociales à Paris. I'm sure that we will have an excellent presentation and debate about sociology and history in Latin America. I think it's a great subject to discussion in Brazil, in other countries in Latin America. Dear Professor, thank you for your participation. Please feel free to make your presentation. We have about 30 minutes for the presentation, I think, because we have this little problem. I'm not sure if we will have time for the debate. It depends. If so, we will open for discussion at the end of the presentation. Please, Professor, thank you once again. You can start. It's up to you at the moment. Thank you.
I would only like to add one little detail to Professor Garretón's trajectory. He has been a Simón Bolívar professor at the University of Cambridge, at the Center of Latin American Studies of the University of Cambridge. Thanks, Professor Garretón.
Thank you, Freya and Marcos, and everybody that has been in the organization of this conference. I thank you very much. I am very honored to be invited to this. And first, I must apologize for all the problems that we have had, a confusion about time. I must apologize also about my poor English, and especially because I'm not sure what will happen during my speech, because only 1 day before I had a surgery in the eye. So I must have this kind of glass that I don't know very well how to use it in order to read some notes. So it's a first time that I make a conference using these glasses and with these new eyes.
Everything will work fine, Manuel. We are sure. We are in Latin America. Everything is possible. So feel free.
Well,
you know.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
We live in fantastic realism and so on. There's no problem for us, you know. So everything is okay.
Yes, that magic realism is very important. If I have time, I wanted to use to quote Garcia Marquez about what are indeed life. And how finally life is not what we think it is, it's not what we have to live, is the way that we remember this, and the way that we tell what happens. And that is a real life. Well, anyway, I'm not an methodologist, not a theoretician. I try to understand some process that happens in the society, especially socio-political problems. So what I will do is some reflections about first how history and sociology has been related in Latin America. Then I will propose a concept that I have used, perhaps it's not useful for everybody, but I have used to understand this socio-political process. And finally, if I have time, to try to question if it is possible to apply this concept to cities. I mean, because that is the main subject of the, not perhaps of this conference, but of the organization that organized this conference. So first, relation between sociology and history in Latin America. We can say that sociology, in general in Latin America, there are differences from country to country, but was born in order to study processes, not as sociology in the Europe or in the United States. They tried to study, they wanted to study some society that was established, what was called modern society. Sociology was born in Latin America to study development or process of industrialization or process of urbanization, not cities, process of urbanization, process of transition, process of not democracy, but process of democratization under the dictatorship. So sociology was born to study social change and social process. And if that is the main vocation, if that is the main objective of sociology, to understand process in this type of society that are always in process and in social change, history is a main dimension, is an element central to the analysis of this society. Then we can say the events that we study has, at least we can say, three different historical dimensions. On one side, the history behind what happened or what led to this process or to this event. Second, the history of the event itself. For example, I have had a study the process of Unidad Popular, the popular unity of the government of Allende. Then you must trace the history behind that, but also what the sequence of the events, if you want. But it seemed to me that that aspect, I think these two dimensions, obvious in the analysis of a process, are not only important, you can't get rid of that. You must do that. I mean, the process is history in itself. It carries history also. But the other aspect is what that is very linked with what we have said about the Garcia Marquez code, that there is something that we can call immanent history. That is the history present in the event, not only the background, not only the history of the event, but the actors, the subject of an event, of a process, are loaded with history. Let me put an example for this. You cannot understand why in the last election, presidential election, the president Boric obtained 55% of the votes, and the candidate of the right 44 plus comma. If you don't go to the plebiscite of 1988 that put end to the military regime, to the dictatorship. Pinochet at that moment obtained 44%. The no, I mean the reject of Pinochet obtained 55. I left apart the comma. Exactly the same. Exactly the same. That means, and the candidate of the right was the Pinochet in democratic situation and in democratic scene. So that is very important. What means that? That means that the main cleavage of the Chilean society is still there. It's the same, is a cleavage that started with the harassment of the La Moneda and the death of Allende and the beginning of the dictatorship. It's not a coincidence. It's something that is that you must explain and link both aspects. And that is history. Well, we have said that I say that then that sociology and history have been related to explain process and social change in our societies, and has been at least in these three ways. So, and that is true for a long period, since sociology was born, as I have said. And all the main theories or debates about Latin American society or Latin American societies. When we talk about Latin American society, we are talking of a typical, I suppose that the historians do not like very much, but it's a typical tool of the of sociology, that is the ideal type. Ideal type condensate historical traits, but evade the historical sequence, because the ideal type exists in a very different history, the same ideal type of a society in the same during a long period that history changed. Well, anyway, what seems to me important is that if you would take all the main debates, always history is interest the discussion about revolution or the possibility of socialism against theory of modernization, for example, was based on the idea if I'm not taking part of that, but is Latin America was or not still a feudalist society or a capitalist society? And when it appeared the dictatorship, of what we have called the modern dictatorship of the Southern Cone, the main question is a typical Latin American dictatorship, or is a dictatorship new, a new kind of dictatorship? And that forces you to analyze history. How were the traditional and classic dictatorship? And here we have a very different type of dictatorship. There are criminals, okay, but it's a different type of dictatorship. Institutional in the most advanced industrialized country, etc. So you need to go to history to compare and say, well, the nature, the sociological nature is different. Then when you have all the debates about democracy and about democratization, well, one thing was to make comparative history, not only the history of these societies and the success and failures alongside this story of the democracy, but how other societies, what was the history of other societies about democracy. And then you understand that the meaning of democracy was different for Latin American societies than it was, for example, for the British society or Spanish society. And you need the element of history in order to give account of that. It must be recognized that after the process of political democratization, the end of the dictatorship, with the process of neoliberalism and globalization, that started a process of exploding the cohesion of a society, a cohesion that was also a cohesion coercive, with inequalities, etc., etc., etc. But it was some kind of cohesion. The neoliberalism fragmented society, neoliberalism, globalization, and the response of identities fragmented all that, fragmented society. And we were in place of what we can call broken societies. I will use afterward exploded societies, fragmented, not only the division and classes of in classes that was typical of Latin America, but here we have a much more fragmented society. I will say with a disappear, or at least the weakening of the polis, of the political community. And that means that it's an hypothesis that in difference with other periods, and we are doing history here, Latin American societies, perhaps with one exception, miss of one central problematical historical problematic. For example, development, modernization, revolution, democracy. In neoliberal and globalized society, there are no one central problem with different perspective or change, but centered on the solution of that central problem. What you have is fragmented society, fragmented problems. So the dimension, the lack of this central problem, I said there was one exception. I have no time to explain one. I would say Bolivia. But all the other societies, you can say, what is the problem, the historical problematic of this society, and how you go to solve that? I mean, changing society. To what type of society you will be directing the change? So what you have is not a central problem, but a variety, diversity, overlapping different problems without a central vision of what kind of society you want. And then the dimension, the historical dimension, was displaced to the focus on different problems. So you have, in order to study the different problems, gender, ecological, problem, security, public security, poverty, inequalities, etc., etc. A lot of many problems. What you must do is to study the history or the trajectory of this particular sphere, and not necessarily the history of the historical dimension of the society as such, because at the limit you can say there is not exist a society. There are many authors that talk about the end of society, especially in, I would say, not in the developed societies or in the Western side or even in Asia, where you have societies. In Latin America, you have broken, fragmented society without an structural historical problematic, and then without a vision of one type of society. And that was the typical way to do sociology until this moment. And then we have to make a different kind of sociology where, and that we are lacking today of this, we're starting to retake this tradition of sociology in order to study one central problematic of society and the different actors and subjects that are involved. So one of the assets of the sociology in Latin America was what the CEPAL called the historical structural method. And we are today using always this method beyond this fascination with some kind of method that allow you to publish in indexed reviews. Well, at least you have this method, but for the different problems of society, we are missing of a vision of the society as such, each one, and then the society, the Latin American society. So the second question that I wanted to say is to talk about this concept of socio-political matrix. Please, Mr. Moderator, can you tell me how many time I have still?
10 minutes.
10 minutes? Thank
Yes.
you very much. In the 80s, 70s, 80s of the last century, in the leaving the dictatorship after some years, I remember with a lot of some colleagues, we put that question. Why? In Argentina, in the first 6 months of the military dictatorship, you have a national strike. And why in Chile? No one, but not only that, during all the period of the dictatorship, we never had a national strike. And then you must, as economists would say, ceteris paribus, repression, because it was the same kind of repression. What explains that? And then the question was, listen, because the working class that supposedly can make, organize a national strike, and also other actors are constituted in a different way in Argentina and Chile. And in Chile, they need parties. Without parties, you don't have working class. You have working class in a sense of, in a census, you will have that. But listen, but as an actor, as a subject, they need parties. Perhaps working class in Argentina need Perón, but not a party system. So the question was, when we talk of a society, the question is how the society is constituted, but how the actors are constituted. And then the idea was, there is a backbone in a society. And we went beyond that metaphor and said, listen, what produce the actors and subjects, but is produced by the actors and subjects is a matrix, that is a configuration, or more simple, relations, a set of relation, not necessarily juridical, institutionalized, not necessarily institutionalized, relation between the state, because in Latin America the state is the main referent of collective action. It has been the main reference of collective action. The system of representation, cultural orientation and model of development, mediated by the political regime. That are the elements of the matrix. And that allow us to make a relative simplification of history, if you want. But listen, what was the main matrix? Socio-political matrix, constituted and constituting the actors. In the 19th century was the oligarchical socio-political matrix. And what was the main way of, for some countries, because in many countries, for example, Central America, it was maintained as the oligarchical matrix. What we have was in countries like Argentina, Brazil, Chile, Uruguay, subsequent, and all Mexico, etc., was the state national popular matrix, taking the concept national popular as a tribute to Gino Germani, one of the founders of sociology. But statist, the state, not only national popular, the role of the state. And then what was the historical structural problematic that society, that matrix tend to try to solve, was the inclusion of masses in the 20s or 30s of the last century, the changing model of development from out to inner development, process of industrialization, etc., and within a state, particular formal state that was called the state of compromise. All things elaborated by different sociologists. I mean, the state of compromise is Francisco Befort, who said for the first time that idea. That is a difference with the oligarchical state, a state where there are different sectors fighting for hegemony with exclusion of peasants, the poor people, and the poor people of the favelas, of the cities. So, so then you can analyze how in this form of relation of the different component, if there is or not a driving force. It could be the economy, it could be political, it could be at some moment culture. And then the type of regime. And in a state national popular matrix, it was the hybrid regime, sometimes democratic, sometimes authoritarian, or inside a stable democratic regime, element of exclusion or authoritarian. The case of Mexico is exactly the best example of that. Then it was possible to analyze the crisis of this state national popular matrix, and the replacement, the partial replacement, by what we can call the neoliberal matrix. That is a way to configure and all these different elements or components of the matrix. And what was the most important thing today was this idea that we accept the case of Bolivia, we don't have a socio-political matrix. We have a socio-political, an exploded socio-political matrix. And that is explained, and that is shown by the crisis of representation, the crisis of the different actors, the crisis of the state, and of the model of development. So we have a society that has a political regime that is clear, is democracy, but all the other elements of society are exploding and without relation with this democracy. So this concept, the idea is that is born, a socio-political matrix is born in order to solve historical problematic, historical structural problematic of a society, and has a limit concept, if you want, that is the case of the state national popular was development or modernization or revolution. And that means that is a way to organize conceptually what we are living as a Latin American society today. And that means that you must make the history or how you arrive to this matrix. And second, what is the history of the matrix, inside the matrix? What happened with it? And finally, I would say only 2 words, because we have no time, that perhaps it's possible to apply this concept of socio-political matrix to cities. I have had this I have tried to do that, studying the role of municipalities. It's complicated to say that a city lives an historical structural problem, but perhaps yes, why not? And it's not the state, but it is the authority. And what are the main actors? And perhaps you can also find a mode of development and cultural orientation. In that sense, what is very important is that you could use this matrix, this type of analysis for political, for public policy. And as the context has a normative element, I would say a good policy is one that generate capacity of the state to act, reinforce civil society and participation, and reinforce the democratic regime inside that city or that municipality, etc. Well, that is everything. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor, for the excellent presentation. I think we have a lot of questions about your presentation, but we have a problem of time. I'm not sure if we have 5 minutes. I have a first question because in Brazil, it's there is a kind of paradox because the sociology is always historical, but the field of historical sociology is often not recognized as a specific field of research. I think that is an interesting question. Do you think this situation is the same in other Latin America country, the weakness of the socio-historical field, like field of research?
Well, listen, it's not a problem. It's very good that sociology is historical sociology. The only problem is that you don't discuss what historical sociology, when sociology is not historical sociology, you can have a field especially for that. But there you will be able to discuss issues, subjects, but also methodology. The only problem that do not have a specific field of historical sociology is that the methodological aspect cannot be discussed, developed, etc. So you must, in that case, I would say, you must go to research committees on different other aspects and introduce there the discussion of historical methodology. I think that the main contribution of Latin American sociology to society and to universal sociology has been the permanent consideration of history inside all the concepts and the debates. And the problem is that perhaps what we will not have a Tilly. And some people devoted directly to study of methodology. That is a problem. I mean, it's a bad thing. We must develop that, but we must. If today sociology is less historical sociology in Latin America, except when we take a concrete aspect that you have, the historical dimension of gender, of ecology, etc., etc. But for what was the main contribution of Latin American sociology to society was to study society as such, and then put history, economy, etc. But today, we don't have this vision either. If you cannot share that, but either of the development or modernization or revolution or socialism, but what kind of society? Perhaps the only, I insisted that, perhaps the only country where you have that has been Bolivia, because they define their historical structural problem as the plurinationality. I mean, that is not possible in all the countries. Huh? But they find that as a central problem, and they arrive to that. Then Bolivia is the most, in sociological terms, the most Latin American country, Latin American, and the most de-Latin American country today, because they do not share the central problematic of the other society that we don't know what it is.
Thank you, Professor. I think it's an interesting discussion, but we have problem with time. The organization said we need to stop now. Yes, but I think again the professor, the audience, I think we can finish the session, and thank you for everyone, and I hope we can discuss this subject in other conference and in other situation.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
Thank you, Professor.
Thanks, Marcus. Thanks, Manuel. It's really a pity that we don't have time, but it was really nice to give us an overview on this issue of history in sociology in Latin America. Many thanks. Bye.
Goodbye.
Gracias, Professor.
Bye. Gracias. Bye.